Safe and agile are growing. Safe and agile are also failing. Both of these statements are true at the same exact time. But how? Let me tell you how and why. Welcome back to Desperate Radio, where we talk about why work doesn't work. It should work. We know why it doesn't work. We've talked about it a few times on this show. We're going to talk about it some more today. I'm Haas, a very frustrated but yet always happy Agile expert. And here's to tell you about the things why doesn't Agile work, why work doesn't work. So how could two statements diametrically opposed mean exactly the same thing? Well, let me tell you. SAFe has been climbing consistently and successfully, if I may add, in the last few years across large enterprises and organizations. A significant amount of enterprises are now running some flavor of SAFe. And they may not call it SAFe. They may call it something else. It's Agile for sure, or Agile Theater, as I'd like to call it. And here's the thing. The problem with that is that there's a lot of practitioners in the community that are exhausted by it, and they're just tired of the bureaucratic part of it, the theater, the slapping a name on something and calling it SAFe, calling it a ceremony, call it Agile, whatever you want to call it, but they're not really following through. And the problem is that a lot of these organizations are disconnected from true agility. That's a huge thing. The criticism isn't wrong, but it's not the whole story. These organizations are looking for a way to perform better, to deliver better, to find a way to attract more talent, to find a way to find out exactly what's not working. So they go and they see everybody's practicing Agile. At least some of the most successful companies out there are practicing Agile. And they say, let's go ahead and try it. So they try it. But the problem is that they try it without actually embodying the mindset itself. Story time. A little bit over 26 years ago, a group of frustrated engineers got together and said, there's got to be a better way of doing this. I actually met one of them a while ago, not for very long. He was at a speaking engagement at a PI planning event, as a matter of fact. And I just happened to say hi to him real quick right after. And we talked about one of my favorite things that he said. Can't ship shitty code. Can't scale shitty code. It's the same thing goes for practice. You can't scale shitty practice. If you have bad practice, you can't scale it. You can't say that this is the way we've been doing things and we're going to carry it across the entire organization. Some of those bad practices are calling something a stand-up when it's not really a stand-up, calling something a backlog when it's not really a backlog, saying something is ready when it's not really ready. That's the problem. If you apply it with the wrong mindset, it's not going to work. So those engineers got together and they said, there's got to be a better way of doing this. So they came up with the Agile Manifesto, 12 principles, 4 values of how to do work correctly. I think one of my favorite ones in there is true measurement of success is a working software. I take this, here we are 26, 27 years later, and say true measurement of success is a working solution, whatever your solution to your end user may be. That's your true measurement of success. I'm not going to go through the rest of the principles, but they really do speak to how you should change your way of approaching things. I'll speak to maybe 2 more. One of them is about respect for others and having interpersonal relationship with people as opposed to just communication through contracts and messages and emails and whatnot and documentation. We're not saying don't have contracts, don't have documentations, but focus on the personal relationship, building that relationship with your customer, with your workers, with your coworkers, with your vendors. Make sure you build that relationship because it leads to a happy path. My other favorite one is maximizing the work undone. And that one actually took me a while to figure out, to understand what it means. And basically, don't work on things that they're not prioritized right now. That's in its simplest form. Don't start working on something that nobody has thought of. Nobody has even given it a shot yet. Nobody, yes, it's good that you brought it, but it's not part of what needed to be worked on right now. Let's put a pin in it and come back to it when it matters, when it's the right time. So I encourage you, I'll put the link below to the original manifesto. I hope you all read it and enjoy it. And I hope it impacts you the way it did with me. So you heard me many times say before that I've seen Agile good, bad, ugly, theater, everywhere in between, all the stuff that can happen. One of my war stories that I like to talk about is when I was working with this company, and this phrase, I can't tell you how many times I've heard this phrase, and I never get tired of telling the story, this particular story, this particular incident where someone says, "Well, we know that that's the way it's supposed to work in the playbook, but in real life, that's not how really things work." It's just an excuse. You're just finding excuses for you not to put the effort to do the right thing. You're basically saying, I read it. I don't agree with it. I'm going to have my team and the people that do the work actually figure it out because I don't feel like putting in the effort to change the way I do things or change my mindset. That's how things like that fail. That's why people out there saying Agile doesn't work, because someone with authority made a decision to say, we're not going to do it this way. Instead of the reality of actually talking to your team and finding out what is the best way to address this. The other thing that person didn't do is they didn't talk to someone and say, why do we need to do this thing that Safe or Agile says we have to do it this way? Did you find out why? Do you know why? Do you care why? So you just basically took the power away from your team. You slapped a name on something that is already a bad practice, an anti-pattern, as we like to call in the industry, and you called it Agile. And now almost every person that works in that area, it's 120 people, I believe, they are all under the impression that what you said is gospel. So therefore, when they go to their next job or move on in their careers or they have their own teams, now they're thinking that, hey, we don't have to follow what Safe told us. We don't have to follow what Agile told us. We can do it our way that makes sense to us and not think about the consequences. Now, some of you may be out there saying, Haas, didn't you say you like to customize Safe? You like to kind of do your own thing and just let people, work, meet them where they are? Yes, absolutely. That still holds true. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't strive to get better. You may not be ready for this thing that Safe tells you that you have to do, and that's okay. But that doesn't mean that you should just abandon it completely. I think a good example of that is business objectives. A lot of companies that start off on Safe don't understand what's a business objective, as in how do you document a business objective when you start planning? How do you attach or use them as guardrails for the features and the work that you're building? So during PI planning, you're supposed to identify what business objectives are you delivering? And a lot of times, a lot of folks, they will list the features that they're working on as their business objectives. They don't understand the distinction. Now, I've worked with teams like that in the past, and I say, it's okay. You don't have to identify what it is right now. Whatever you're doing right now is fine. But do you know why I say that? Because there's a prioritization of the work that they need to do. First off, is do you even have features? Do you even size them? Are you even delivering any of the stuff that you said you're going to deliver? So I prioritize some of that stuff. This is where I meet you where you are. This where you as a practitioner should meet people where they are. Start grabbing things that are fixable now, that will have immediate impact now, and start working towards better improvement, towards continuous improvement. Knowing that you have to identify what your business objectives are, I worked with that team until they finally understood the basic concept of having a business objective. And then we started slowly implementing it. Once they figure out how to, first of all, write a proper feature, write a proper user story, give it a proper size, give it a proper business value. Because as far as I'm concerned, you got to learn those basics first before you start growing into scaled Agile framework, heavy, rigid implementation practices. That's That's how I view that. Another real problem that I ran into the past is where this one enterprise that had a bunch of agile coaches go get safe certifications, and they basically took the manual from their classes and rewrote it in their own language, in their own words. And they just, again, slapped certain words that they thought that made sense onto it, which is fine. But then they added onto it more than they should have. Way more than they should have. They've made it into this process manual that addresses every single step in your workday, whether you're a product owner, a product manager, a scrum master, an RTE, an executive. I think executives were excluded, actually. that was the only thing that was excluded. Whether you're an engineer, an architect, a system architect, whatever the case may be, all the ceremonies for each level, whether it's program, art, portfolio, team, they wrote literally everything, which is not a bad idea, but they wrote it. Not the people that work the work, not the people that do the actual work, not the people that do the actual delivery, not the people that actually are the architects, not the actual scrum masters, the actual product owners, the product managers, the actual release train engineers. They didn't talk to anybody about that. They just wrote what they thought, what SAFe wanted them to do, and they wrote it exactly how they interpret it. And they just said, this is how we do work from now on. And it was not touched or updated in about 6 years. I know this because I read the version history and I know when it was last updated. So, as a matter of fact, I know this because the folks that were supposed to be updating it, from my understanding, they moved them to another department and some of them even left the company. So there was no one left to update that artifact. Imagine working off something that's, we'll say at this time, 8 to 9 years old, and no one updated it. And then when you get pushback as an executive from people that are in the field, like your engineers, your architects, your scrum masters, your product owners, on the way things are supposed to work, the way they're supposed to be communicated, and the pushback is, well, the manual says this, or the process manual says that, or the playbook says this. We've worked really hard on this playbook, so we're going to do what the playbook says. And there you go. And that's why Agile is failing. That's why SAFe is failing. Agile is not broken, folks. We are. This is exactly why. This is exactly why. SAFe isn't the problem. Cargo culting SAFe is. There's a difference between organizations running SAFe and getting ROI out of it, and companies and organizations just slapping SAFe terminology and whatnot on whatever is right in front of them. Hey, let's replace PMO with IMO or LACE. Let's replace project manager with RTE. Let's replace deadlines with sprints. That's the most common one. There are so many memes out there about replacing, about using deadlines as deliverables for sprints or something like that. I've seen so many of those. That comes at a place of pain. All these memes and jokes, they come out of a place of pain. A lot of practitioners, a lot of folks that experts like me see this stuff and they say, why? And we laugh out of pain, out of misery, not because we think it's hilarious, because it's true. It's true. A lot of executives, a lot of leadership, they don't embody the mindset and they say, let's just make the people happy by replacing these archaic, outdated terminology with SAFe terminology or agile terminology to show people that we're moving in the right direction, but you don't actually do the work. And that's a problem. That's agile theater. That's all it is. Here are 3 signs that you're in a SAFe theater or agile theater. Business objectives that are not visited during the PI to make sure that we're on track. Inspect and adapt with no actual adapt. It's the retrospective of the whole PI. If you're doing retrospective or inspect and adapt with no action plan to follow through, or you're not actually following through on those action plans. And lastly, roaming risk without one move. I hope everybody understands what roaming is. Roaming a risk is when you identify a risk, you go through the roaming, which is it's resolved, it's owned, it's accepted, or it's mitigated. And you know what? I'll go a step further and explain each one of those. Resolved means the risk is resolved. Owned means that somebody is owning the risk and they're gonna find a solution for it, or a resolution for it rather. Accepted means that you accept the risk as is. And I want to talk about this one specifically because talk about anti-patterns and agile theater. I've seen folks in the past where they say, well, we accept the risk. Do you know what that means? That you just accepted the risk? Yeah, we accept that what we read is a risk. That's what they were said. We accept that what we read is a risk. That's not what accepted means. Accepted means that we understand the risk and we're okay with the fact that this is a risk that's going to happen. That's what accepted risk mean. And in my opinion, and I don't know, I've only been doing this for a little bit over 16 years now, is that if you run into a risk that has a low priority, low impact, everything low on it, I think that's okay to accept. And a good example of me accepting a risk is if I'm publishing a website and there's a small misprint or the fonts are, that's a small acceptable risk to me as a business owner, as a stakeholder. How does that risk impact my operational integrity and the integrity of my business? So please, when you say you accept risk, understand what it means. And finally, mitigation, meaning that the risk is finally mitigated. So that's what roaming is. So that's your agile theater. If you have those three things in there, PI objectives that are not visited or even talked about during the PI to make sure that you're on the right track. If your risk is not roamed correctly and never moves, your risk never moves from accepted to mitigated to whatever else, right? And if you do an inspect and adapt or a retrospective with no actual follow-up to adapt or improve, that's your agile theater. If any of that is happening, you're living in an agile theater. So I'm going to ask you one thing to do after this episode. Pull your current PI objectives. Did you deliver them? Do you even know if you delivered them? Are they on the right track? Answering that will give you everything that you need to know if you're in agile theater or not, or if you need to work on something. Folks, as I've said before, agile is not broken. We are. SAFe handed us the tools, but we decided to use every tool as a hammer. Everything that comes out of SAFe Playbook, we use it as a hammer. This is the work that I do as an ASPC, Advanced SAFe Practice Consultant. There's about 150 or 200 of us in the world, and the number is growing. If your organization is running SAFe and wondering why nothing is changing, why nothing is moving, let's talk. I'm currently in the process of building a school community, that's SKOOL, and we're going to dive deep into SAFe and how it's supposed to work. So stay tuned for that. There will be no textbooks, no playbooks, just real solutions, real world solutions and real stories about how to fix things that you run into like this. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please tune in for more. If you'd like to hear more, make sure you like, comment, share, subscribe. Make sure you share this with somebody that can really benefit from it. If you or anybody's interested in learning more or getting certified or moving up in your career, make sure you check out the Next You link down below in the comment. And if you want to be part of the show, talk about what we talked about today or talk about anything else regarding everything that we talk about on the show, let me know. I can invite you on here, or I can tell you war stories if you'd like to. Thank you once again. I'm Haas, and this is Dead Sprint Radio.